My 10-year high school reunion was coming up, and I wasn't exactly thrilled about it. I hadn't planned on going, but my friends, Kayla, Marissa, and Sophia, convinced me it would be fun. The reunion was scheduled for a Saturday in August at a catering hall in a nice part of town. I hadn't seen most of these people in a decade, and the thought of making small talk with 100 former classmates sounded like torture. But FOMO got the better of me, and I decided to go. The night of the reunion, I drove to Kayla's house to pregame with the girls. By the time we called an Uber to the venue, we were all in high spirits. The reunion started at 8 p.m., but we rolled in fashionably late at 9 o'clock. The party hall was packed, easily 80 to 100 people, and the vibe was surprisingly lively. There was a DJ, party lights, and a lot of drinking. It wasn't the quiet, intimate gathering I'd imagined. My friends and I sat at a table with a few other girls from high school. As the night went on, everyone started mingling, and I found myself alone at the table, nursing a drink and feeling awkward. That's when I noticed him, a guy I didn't recognize sitting at another table, staring at me. When our eyes met, I looked away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. A few minutes later, he walked over and introduced himself as Connor. He was decent looking, and I was bored, so I didn't mind the company. He told me he'd transferred to our school senior year, which explained why I didn't remember him. We chatted for a while, and he seemed normal enough. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without thinking much of it. After he left, I went to find my friends, who were scattered around the room, drunk and deep in conversation. I was starting to feel out of place and just wanted to go home. That's when Connor texted me, offering me a ride home. I jumped at the chance to leave without having to say goodbye to everyone. I met him in the lobby, and we walked to his car, a black two-door coupe. He handed me a water bottle from the back seat and suggested I drink it to avoid a hangover. I took a few sips, but something felt off. My phone started blowing up. Kayla was calling, and Marissa and Sophia were texting me frantically. They'd seen me leave with Connor and were warning me about a post in the reunion's Facebook group. Someone had warned everyone about a random guy who wasn't from our school, going around introducing himself with different names. My stomach dropped. I looked at Connor, then at the water bottle in my hand. I felt a wave of dizziness and realized he must have drugged me. When we stopped at a red light, I opened the door and bolted, running into the parking lot of a nearby TGI Fridays. I called Kayla, and she told me to stay put while they came to get me. I waited in that parking lot for what felt like forever, my mind racing. When my friends finally arrived, I was shaking. We all stayed at Kayla's house that night, and the next morning, I drove home, still feeling uneasy. But the nightmare wasn't over. Later that day, my neighbor knocked on my door and asked if I knew the guy who'd been lurking around my apartment the night before, peeking through my windows. My neighbor had confronted him, and the guy asked if Miranda lived there. Thankfully, my neighbor lied and said he had the wrong apartment. I moved to a different apartment in the same complex as soon as my lease was up. I'll never forget how close I came to something truly horrifying that night. The 5-year reunion, Tyler's return. A few years before the 10-year reunion, I attended my 5-year high school reunion. My high school was small, with about 200 kids per grade, so everyone knew everyone, even if just by name. My best friend Julia and I decided to go together. Julia and I had been inseparable since middle school, and she knew all about my history with Tyler, a guy I'd hooked up with a few times senior year. Tyler quickly became obsessive, sending me threatening texts and even showing up at my house to throw rocks at my window. My dad had to chase him off, and eventually, he left me alone. When Julia and I arrived at the reunion, I was nervous. I didn't want to see Tyler, but I figured he wouldn't show up. I was wrong. About an hour into the night, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there he was, Tyler. He asked if we could talk, but I shut him down immediately. When he grabbed my shoulder, I pushed him off and walked away. The rest of the night, I avoided him like the plague.